there's been some questions asked in advance through a poll that was sent out, a survey that was sent out to attendees. So I know we've definitely got 2 or 3 questions that have been asked. So we'll get to those as well, and then there'll be an opportunity for us as we go along for people to put questions in the chat box, and then we can facilitate those as we reach the end. Have we still got people coming in, Lisa? I can't see.
We have, yes. So we'll just I think we should probably get going, if that's okay. We're people are coming in as we're talking. So I'll just run through a quick bit of housekeeping, and then I'll hand over to you, Amy, and the panel.
Yeah.
Lovely. So welcome everybody. Let me just make sure that I am recording. That seems to be happening already. Yeah. Isn't Zoom very clever? So welcome everybody to our webinar, The Wild West of Influencer Marketing. Thank you for joining us. We've been delighted with the interest in our webinar today, so thanks for joining the live version. We are recording this session, and we will be making it available afterwards. So let me just dive in. Just what to expect. It will be a panel discussion today led by Amy Kingham, our Global Compliance Manager here at PromoVeritas. Thank you, Amy. And we're also delighted to be joined by 2 panel guests, which I'll let Amy introduce in a mere moment. We do want you to share your questions. No doubt there are a lot of questions on this particular topic, so please use the Q&A panel in the Zoom platform to do that. Our running order is about 30 minutes, and then, as Amy and Raf mentioned, we hope to have time at the end to cover off your questions. So without further ado, I shall stop sharing and I'll hand to Amy and let you kick off. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Lisa. So first and foremost, some introductions. I'm sure some of you who have attended our sessions previously might be familiar with these 2 charming faces that have joined me this morning. But first, I would like to introduce Raf McDonnell. If you could just talk very, very quickly about your role and what your experience is, Raf, that would be fantastic.
So I am the founder of Talent and Brands, and also co-managing partner of Supernova. So my background is a marketeer for many years in FMCG marketing, working for the likes of Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, and then worked in the talent world for the last 15 or so plus years, working with celebrity talent like VMI Music, and then as an agent at CAA. With Talent and Brands, we represent a bunch of, or I shouldn't call them a bunch, a wide variety of social creators, from the likes of Rob Mayhew through to gardening creators and fashion and art creators, and also we broker celebrity brand deals for brands.
So coming from a place of a pretty extensive amount of experience, I would suggest.
Thank you.
And Jason Freeman as well. So you join us from the Competition and Markets Authority. If you could just give us a bit of an insight about your role and how you've come to feed into all the guidance that the CMA have issued over the years.
Yeah, well, good to be with you all this morning. I'm a legal director at the Competition and Markets Authority, so I mainly work on consumer enforcement. And I've worked on our enforcement projects on social media endorsement, so working with influencers about how they should properly disclose their commercial interests when they're posting advertisements that they're on brands or whatever that they're connected with in some way. And I've worked with Instagram and other social media platforms to help them to improve how people are able to label their posts and so on. I've also worked on a whole range of other things as well, of course, to do with online reviews and other things.
Just the throwaway other things. Extensive amount of experience. Fantastic. Well, just to set the scene then, I think I would probably be teaching grandma to suck eggs to say that brands and agencies really have no reliable way to measure the return on investment of traditional advertising campaigns. And that's why we reach for the internet to provide those sort of more cost-effective ways to directly reach our consumer with more precision and with more easily measurable results. You know, we're using influencers to reach out to those people that we know sit in a certain demographic or have a certain interest group, and that's achieving results that we can see. As a bit of an overview on the money behind this kind of stuff, the global digital advertising spend in 22 was just over $667 billion US, and in 23 78% of those global brands say that they will increase increase their budget or maintain the same amount. So we've seen a trajectory, even with the likes of obviously the cost of living crisis, brands are still investing in trying to reach those consumers because they want their consumers to be aware and able to make those decisions on who to spend with wisely and why. And that investment is, unfortunately, in very relatively little of their overall budget is targeted towards influencer marketing. Just 27 billion, or only just over 4% essentially is what that equates to. So we can see that there is a huge opportunity for marketers who want to gain that competitive advantage. Now, again, we're all sitting here. Influencer marketing is not a new concept. It's been running for decades in one guise or another. And the trajectory for that has drastically increased, to use celebrities to endorse or appear in advertising campaigns to just increase that awareness. So as advertising costs soar, consumers are seemingly responding favorably to influencer recommendations over the more traditional types of advertising. And 71% of brands are saying that they expect influence to play a bigger role in their overall digital marketing mix next year. So social media has pretty much leveled that playing field, whichever side of that famous for what fence you're sitting on. And we understand that influencers can help brands reach and build a community with a dynamic relationship. So that's why we're here. That's why brands are so interested in doing things right and understanding the scope of what influencer marketing guidelines actually are. So Jason, it makes sense to come to you first with a question. And what is the role of the Competition and Markets Authority as a non-ministerial, but a government department, obviously, nonetheless? And what are the regulations, as a fairly broad overview, surrounding influencer marketing?
Yeah, so the regulations, I'll start with that first. The regulations are the Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading regulations. So they've been enforced for a while now. So since 2008, where they came in 2009. And so the law has been around for a while. And the law really is about prohibiting misleading advertising. And people who are engaged in social media influencing might say, well, I'm not doing advertising. But I think the view that we take is, if you've received an incentive, you've been paid, you've had a gift or something like that, then what you're posting is advertising. So it falls within the scope of the regulations, and the regulations prohibit people from being misled. So if we think about why is it that consumers go to, or why do ordinary people go to social media, what are they looking for there? Are they there because they want to look at advertising? Are they there because they want to have a sort of an insight into somebody's life and get an authentic experience of what people are doing? Probably a bit of a mixture, but people need to know which it is they're seeing. Are they watching somebody who's doing something interesting that they're going to find entertaining? Are they watching something which is basically advertising? And it shows respect to your viewers to make clear when you're advertising and when you're just posting something which is just about your life. So that's what the regulations are trying to achieve, right? That people know what they're seeing and they're not going to be tricked into seeing advertising that they weren't expecting to see. What is our role in this? Well, the legislation can be enforced in the civil courts. It can be enforced in the criminal courts. So we're an enforcer, but we're not the only enforcer. There are other enforcers as well. So there's also local authority trading standards. They enforce, and of course the Advertising Standards Authority are probably the body who people are most familiar with in this sector. And we've produced joint guidance with the ASA about what we both expect influencers and brands to be doing in this sector. And the message really is a simple one, that we expect people to label advertising as advertising, and there is no inconsistency between us and the ASA and other enforcers in this. So that's what we're looking for people to do, and that's our role, is to ensure that people are doing that sort of thing.
And speaking of labeling, what would you consider an acceptable label for an advert?
Well, when we produce guidance on this, we've produced several pieces of guidance. Our view is that something needs to be very clear that it's an advertisement. So advertisement, ad. These are labels which people recognize. So that's the safest thing to do, and that's what we would be looking for influencers to use, and that would be the same for the ASA. I think the ASA actually did some research on what labels people understand, and advertisement, advert. Those are the ones which people understand. It signifies that something is in fact an advertisement, and we'd expect that label to be a clear label, so you can actually see it, and it should indeed be the first thing that people see, so that they know what they're engaging with, and they can watch your post on that basis, and that's great, and they probably enjoy watching the post because it's full of interesting content. but they at least know they're being marketed to. They know that's the basis on which they're looking at this. They're not, this is not going to be a nasty surprise for them, or indeed a surprise when they're halfway through the post and they think, hang on a minute, this is an advert.
Exactly. And you mentioned the regulations. Now, there's a new digital bill coming into place, which I believe is empowering fines to be imposed on those who breach. Can you tell us a little bit more about that briefly?
Yeah, so there's a new piece of legislation going through Parliament at the moment, which is the Digital Market Competition and Consumers Bill. That will probably come into force next year, depending on a whole load of different things like general elections and things like that. That will give the Competition and Markets Authority power to fine people directly and to make findings of infringement. So we would be able to fine up to 10% of worldwide turnover for each infringement of the consumer protection regulations. And so that, that should speed up enforcement, and it will also to some extent raise the stakes of people who are using unlabeled advertising.
Excellent. So it's starting to become something that people really need to sit up and listen to, rather than just worry about maybe an ASA ruling that doesn't have much of a punch to some who would happily accept that. This is now becoming stuff with teeth. We really want to sit up and listen to this. Now, interestingly, as part of the disclosures, I understand that there's a requirement for a previous commercial relationship to be disclosed for a period of 12 months after either the contract has ended or the item had been gifted. Now, when we've had a discussion previously, Raf, you raised a really valid question to Jason about who is responsible for that previous relationship disclosure. Is it the influencer or is it the brand? And I think that's a wider question as well about responsibility of disclosing. Does that sit solely with the influencer, or does the brand have to accept liability as well?
Well, I think the influencer certainly has a responsibility because it's their post. So they're posting something which is sponsored content. So whether they've received a gift, as you say, whether they've had a loan or any kind of payment, something which indicates objectively that they're not just an objective, disinterested kind of observer of what the brand is doing. Yes, that influencer has to label their post. But the brand is the entity that's benefiting from the advertising, and very often it's the brand that starts the marketing campaign. They went out a load of freebies. They'll get into contact with influencers and they'll say, "Do you want to have some free gifts?" or "Here are some free gifts." And the brands know exactly what is going on. They know that there's an expectation that the influencer is going to post about the product, and indeed, when we've investigated relationships in influencers and brands. We identify brands chasing up after they've sent gifts, ostensibly free gifts to influencers saying, "Where's the post? Why haven't you posted?" So it's clear that people operating these marketing campaigns have a very clear expectation that there will be a post. So the brand also is responsible for ensuring that the influencer labels. Now you might say, well, how are they supposed to do that? Because the influencer is just doing the thing. The brand doesn't check it before it's posted, perhaps. There are several practical things that they can do. One is to give clear instructions with the gift or with the payment or whatever. You should give very clear instructions, almost like a contract, saying, look, if you post about this, you've got to label it as an advertisement. You should check that it's been labeled, and you should take effective action if it's not labeled. So getting in touch with the influencer saying, you didn't label the post, can you label it, please? And that's the sort of thing that we would expect brands to do. We don't believe that brands just send out a load of freebies or pay people and then don't check the effectiveness of the marketing. We think they are looking at the posts, and so they should be including within that a check to see whether the posts by those influencers are labeled properly as advertisements.
From my perspective, Jason, I think you're absolutely right. Both parties have to take responsibility. The creator is putting out the content and the brand is instructing the creator of what to do, be it a free gift or a commercial relationship with money exchanging hands. But I think you're absolutely right. There are ways that the brand can monitor and enforce this because it's the brand that's actually instigating it. The creator's not sat there twiddling their thumbs going, oh, what can I do today? They get a request from a brand or an agency to either receive a gift and post or to get paid to post. So in my experience, the best practice in this place would be contractual. So at the contract stage, if you look at some of the best brands out there, that I've worked with, like L'Oreal, they will have very clear pages at the back of their contracts that have almost 2 pages worth of guidelines on what the creator should do, how they should label it #ad, how they should make it clear, where they should make it, that should be at the front of the post. All the things you just said, that should be in a contract. Then there's a brief. You don't send over product without a brief. So in that brief, it should also say, this is an ad. Please make it clear that it's an ad. And then ultimately, most brands ask for approval on the content, either the caption or the content itself. So at that third stage, the final stage, before the creator posts, there's a chance for the brand to say, hold on, you haven't put ad in your caption. And you can send the caption back and say, no, this is the caption that we require. So when I'm working with creators, the brand will also often say, can you suggest the caption? So the creator will put the caption together and then submit it for approval. And then at that point, the brand could say, actually, that's not clear that it's an ad, and then force that an ad should be put, or #ad or ad at the beginning.
There's 3 really valuable top tips, I think, to making sure that the brands are equally responsible for what's going out there. But you mentioned contract. In your position, Raf, how do you protect everybody's interests? And also ensuring that things don't feel too scripted in that brand approval process of the captions. What do you sort of have an experience on that?
So the first thing I was going to say about this is, we're talking about the wild west of influencer marketing, which it can feel like that sometimes to brands in this space. And I think one of the reasons for that is actually the use of the word influencer. Influencing suggests that you are, as a talent or creator, influencing your consumers to do something that they wouldn't normally do. So I often refer to my talent as creators. They're creators rather than influencers. And I think there is a interesting moment right now where consumers are more likely to follow creators that they like because they follow them for their content and they enjoy interacting with them, than, if we go back to the bad old days of an influencer that could just sell anything. Today they're selling one product, tomorrow they're selling another. From an authenticity point of view, do you want to be a brand that's engaging with an influencer that's literally selling products every day? Now, there are some products that can be, on TikTok Shop, there are influencers that can sell and make a lot of money for brands doing that. But if you're going to engage with a creator because you believe in who they are, you are interested in their audience and their followers, and you want them to make a piece of content for your brand, then authenticity becomes really important. So making sure that you have an authentic relationship, that if you're going to get somebody to post about, I don't know, I've got an art creator who creates art projects, then it needs to fit with the brand brief. There's no point getting an art creator to do something that's completely out of their scope of expertise. So authenticity, number one. Have a clear brief on what you want the outcome to be. That doesn't mean write the script for the creator. That means give a clear brief on what you want the brand, the outcome to be. Let the creator then do their job of understanding their audience and understanding how to create great content with the skills that they have. I think if you do those things properly, then you get generally content that everyone's happy with. Yeah. Most of the time, most brands have in a contract that they get 2 rounds of revisions to approve the content. In most cases with the creators I manage, I'd say we nail it first time, rarely have to go back. It's usually just tweaks to, we didn't expect it to be like that. Or for example, with one of my creators, so a lot of people on this call might know Rob Mayhew, the comedian, marketing guy. Rob always writes a script. So that's great. So he sends a script to me. I send that to the brand. We have a briefing call first. He understands the concept. He sends a script, which is great because then the brand signs off on that script. They know what they're getting. So by the time Rob films that and sends it back, they've got a very clear view in their minds of what that might look like. And sometimes there might be something they didn't quite expect. But in general, the clearer you are from brief to contract through to final deliveries, the best possible way to manage the process.
So clarity, communication, authenticity.
Yeah, and don't hide things. I've had like briefs come through on email. Love to work with your creator. We'd like to offer this amount of money. We want to do X, Y, and Z. And then you agree it. And then the contract comes through. And hidden in clause 4.1.1 of the contract is a 3-month exclusivity clause, not allowing them to work with any other brand in the same category. And like, why didn't you mention that at the beginning? Because then we'd have negotiated the right terms to, so I think transparency, in a funny way, Jason talked about transparency of making it clear that it's an ad. I think the whole creator economy needs to be more transparent. from briefing to contract to declarations. I think that would make this less of the Wild West and a much more professional business that we would all then be able to adhere to some of the norms that are normal in marketing in general. You know, there's no reason why influencer marketing should not be at the same high standards that you'd expect from television advertising and other forms of media.
Agreed. It is another form of advertising, so it should be viewed at the same. And those guidelines and parameters to protect both the brand and the influencer, as well, in a way, the community is critical to then have those contracts to make sure that guidance from the CMA is followed, and to make sure there's the ability for everybody to feel comfortable with how they're proceeding. Another question that we had from somebody prior to this the webinar was talking about methods of payment to, let's call them creators, not influencers, gifting versus cash, and the tax implications. Raf, obviously you'll have a view on what is preferred, but also Jason, I'd love to touch on what the CMA says about that kind of the implications surrounding that. So Raf, if we get your view first, and then to Jason.
Yeah, I mean, there are, in most cases, where creators are getting paid for their work, you know, high quality creators getting paid. Then there's also gifting that happens, and that's still an exchange of goods and services, as you know, HMRC would suggest that, and I know the ASA would say the same thing, right? Ultimately, you're exchanging your services and a post in relation in exchange for either a cash settlement or a gift. And obviously, if the gift, doesn't matter what value the gift is, obviously HMRC probably take a different view on the value of the gifts in terms of tax, but it's still you asking a creator to give their services in exchange for a financial benefit, be that cash or a gift. So treat it exactly the same way. And from an ASA point of view, then I would tell all my creators that they have to put ad on every single gifted collaboration. And it used to be a few years ago that creators got away or tried to get away with putting hashtag gifted, but I think it's really clear it's an ad. And I would tell all my creators to just put hashtag ad.
And Jason, you've been very clear in the past that this is yet another reason why brands should be tracking what their influencers do, and influencers should be recording all this stuff, because there will be that tax implication, and the CMA doesn't view gifting and contractual relationships and paid partnerships as any different from one another.
No, that's right. And very, very often gifts and loans, and somebody I think in the chat mentioned about gifted experiences. A lot of the time, these are very expensive. So if a member of the public, you know, you or I, we wanted to have the same experience, it could cost us a few £100s. So that's you know, it's not an insubstantial gift often. Okay, sometimes gifts can be of trivial value, but our guidance encompasses all of these situations. And there isn't a distinction between gifts, payments, experiences, loans. You know, all of these things are exchanges of value. So if you had an exchange of value, you need to keep a record of that, and you need to behave accordingly. So label the advertising which relates to that post. So that's advertising which you're posting in anticipation of getting the gift, advertising which you post after you've had the gift. You know, if there's a connection with the gift, then label the post as an advert, or label the content as an advert. And this is just important. I think the tax implications, I mean, obviously we don't have a particular view on tax implications because we're not the tax authority. But all I would say is that clearly people are going to need to keep records of what gifts and payments they've had for tax purposes. And so that makes it much easier for people to keep a record of what they've received from brands for the purposes of knowing whether they've got to label content, right? You don't have to rely on your memory, because you'll have a record of what you received back in July. And then you
Jason,
can
I ask you a question just on a related area. So if a brand does a launch of a new makeup event and invites loads of creators down, would the creators be expected to put ad on any content they did at a branded event?
I think that depends. It depends to some extent on the nature of the invitation, right? So sometimes, you know, members of the public are invited to something, and we just go as members of the public. But if you're getting access to something which members of the public would not get access to, so it's being given to you, it's a special thing for you because it's special because you're you, then that's a relationship which needs to be disclosed as an advertisement if you then go on to post about that product, right? Because it's not just something which any member of the public can enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think many creators would currently do that. because I don't think the guidance is explicit enough on events. And I think that's probably an area that we should look at more, because I think a lot of creators go to brand events, launches, and there's no expectation of posting, but of course the brand is inviting them on the basis that they will post while they're there. So I think that's probably an area that's a little bit grey at the moment in the regulations. From a talent management point of view, I'd say it's not explicitly clear to creators or to brands. You know, I haven't had brands saying, make sure you post ad when you come to our event. So I think that is probably an area that needs to be tightened up.
I think we might have, we've lost Amy for a moment, so perhaps just while she comes back on, we could cover off some of the questions that have appeared in the chat, Jason and Raf. So a question was, what about gifted experience? And I think you guys have talked about that now, but there is no financial or paid exchange. Jason, I think you've covered there pretty clearly. It still matters, right? It's still monetary value.
Yeah, because as I said, I think a gifted experience is it's worth money, right? I mean, if I want to go off and do something nice for the weekend, unless I'm able to do something for free, it's going to cost me money. So if you offer a free experience to somebody because they're an influencer or whatever, because they're a content creator, then it's clear that that's the same as a payment, really, isn't it? It's like giving them 100 pounds and saying, you know, here's the money, just pay when you come in. It's still payment.
Exactly. And it's good to have you back, Amy. We're just covering off some questions. And next question is the paid partnership label acceptable as an ad disclosure?
So
Raf,
that's a good question.
Jason,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No, that's fine. Go.
I think that's a really good question. I think the paid partnership label is a great label which many people understand. I think our advice is that it's better for people to use advertisement or ad as well, because then it puts it beyond doubt, and then those people that don't quite understand what's going on with paid partnership will not be misled.
Yeah.
I think with all of these sorts of platform-based disclosures, if it doesn't say ad or advert, then you're as well saying that as well. Okay, because sometimes the platform logo may, you know, it's up to them in a way, isn't it? How prominent it is and how clear it is, and sometimes people change things. So
there is a new thing you're seeing a lot more of on TikTok with commission paid. So if a creator is earning a commission from a sale, then TikTok label that as commission paid so you can see that they're not just giving their honest opinion, that they're actually earning money from any related sales that come from it, which is also
essentially a form of affiliate marketing, which I think previously, Jason, you've mentioned affiliate marketing is still in the CMA's position a form of advertising. So you would probably still want to see advert in that basis.
Yeah. I think if
Excellent.
in doubt, label it as an ad, right?
Yeah.
Always label it as an ad.
There's a very good flow chart that the CMA have online that sort of starts at the top, says, are you being paid for your services in any way, cash or gift or whatever? And then if the answer is yes, you come down again. And if the answer is yes, you come down again. And at the end, it pretty much takes you to what Jason just said, which is, if in doubt, label it with ad.
There was the ASA labeling study that Jason referred to earlier, I found very interesting. It was a study of, I think, 1,600 people aged between 13 and 64. So a real diverse range, all social media users on a daily basis. And even when the word ad was the first word in the copy, only 41% of those asked could confidently identify that poster still as an advert. And I think that's something that's really key for us to bear in mind. It would seem so obvious to those of us in this industry, to those of us that work in this kind of area, but to the consumer at the end of the stream who is being marketed to, even with the word ad, it might not necessarily be so clear. So the reference that you were making a minute ago about TikTok, Raf, I would expect a similar thing, that the labeling study wouldn't necessarily pick up on that. So even though we feel, or certain brands might feel it's quite extreme to label something an ad, I think that labeling study just really perfectly encapsulate the need for it and why that is that the CMA are in this position. But to jump now, sorry, I'm for skipping out and you guys nicely answering questions in my absence. But I wanted to go to our final discussion point, which is, as you alluded to earlier, we've called this the Wild West, right? We want to understand, are social platforms doing enough and what can be done? So in our position as PromoVeritas, and I'm sure, Jason, you agree in the position of the CMA, we can be perceived as the blocker potentially when it comes to execution and management of campaigns. And I always joke that we in a legal team are sometimes where creative comes to die, because occasionally we do have to say no, but what we look to do is say, not maybe that, but this is how we could do it, because compliance needs to come from the source of that. And in our experience, sadly, it's the platforms themselves maybe not doing enough to facilitate, some of the newer platforms in particular. We're really struggling when clients run prize promotions via influencers to be able to extract that data to enter people into a competition or into a prize draw. And you mentioned this earlier, Jason, that you work with Instagram and you've done some work with platforms. Can you just give us an oversight on how the CMA involves those platforms when you're introducing those new guidelines?
Well, we did some work with a number of platforms. So we did some work first of all with Instagram, and they agreed to change the way that they facilitate labeling by creators and influencers. And we've set out a number of principles that we expect all platforms to adhere to, and they're set out in our guidance documents. I'm not going to read them all out to you, but I think in summary, what we expect is for platforms to provide a means by which people can label paid for content or incentivize content in some appropriate way. So we haven't gone over what people are actually doing in detail, and we don't continually monitor them like day to day. So what is your tool at the minute? But what we ask them to do is to commit to provide appropriate tools for people to label, and also to make use of their algorithms and their technology to identify suspected unlabeled endorsements and content, and prompt the person posting it to label it properly and to use their content tool or some appropriate tool. And if people don't do that, then we'd want them to make it known to the brand. Okay, you need to look at this. This is a potential problem. Can you confirm that the person posting this has not received some kind of endorsement, or some kind of incentive to write this endorsement? And then, of course, to take action if people aren't properly labeling. So if an influencer is routinely posting content which is not labeled as an advertisement and is in fact advertising, then we'd expect sanctions to be imposed on them. So anyway, that's what the principles say, and we've given platforms time to implement those and ensure that they've built systems to do these things. So it's the kind of thing that periodically we'll come back to and we'll look at and see, well, how effective are these tools? How effective are these principles? Are these principles achieving their objective in making sure that advertisements are properly labeled as advertisements on social media?
Well, I think the platforms need to also adapt, because if they have previously suppressed ads content. So if somebody put hashtag ad in their content, TikTok, for example, would suppress that content. So guess what? Lots of really bad influencers will I don't want to put hashtag ad in my content because it won't get as many views. So I think, and most of the people on this webinar are here because they want to do the right thing, right? And the vast majority of brands probably want to do the right thing, don't do it, or influencers are saying either because they are unaware or don't have the experience. But there are also bad influencers who don't want to put hashtag ad because they don't want to make it clear and they want to hide that. I've had influencers ask me that before, and I've told them I wouldn't work with them if that was the case. I've also had brands come in the brief and say, we don't want your creator to put hashtag ad. And I've had to be the one insisting that my creator will put hashtag ad on there, because otherwise my creator is in breach of the guidelines. So there's always going to be at the extremes, bad brands, bad influencers who want to take advantage of the uncertainty in the marketplace to either get a financial advantage, get their videos viewed more. So I think the platforms have to probably solve that, because they need to instill confidence in the creators that they won't be penalized in terms of their views, and then their financial remuneration comes from their views. So as long as the platforms aren't penalizing them because they're putting hashtag ad, of course they'll be happy to put it on there, because it should be clear, and they want to make that relationship with the brand clear to their consumers and their followers. I don't think any decent creator wants to be unauthentic or inauthentic, whichever is the right word.
Absolutely. And you raised a good point last week when we all chatted about podcasters. And your question to Jason was, what's the CMA's position on those? Are they considered any different any differently to another creator or an influencer, Jason? Is their disclosure still having to be on a similar method or means on a podcast? How would that look?
Yeah, it's the same principle. If you're creating content and you've received an incentive, gift, payment, loan, whatever it is, and you're going to endorse some product or talk about something which you've had access to as a result of that, look at our guidance and just replace influencer with podcaster. All of the principles are the same, and certainly we wouldn't see podcasters as it being in some kind of peculiar category where they don't have to comply with the law. If they're a trader, they're receiving payments or money or whatever it is in exchange for posting, like any content creator, then they need to label their content as an advertisement. Now, it may be that the mechanism in which the labeling takes place might be different in practice, because a podcast not necessarily a visual post, but it still needs to be the first thing that people see. People need to know that what they're engaging with is paid for content. It's advertising content. It's not just a podcast on how you can live a healthier life or something. It's an advertisement, and I think that's basically the key thing is, if it's an advertisement, make sure people know it's an advertisement before they start engaging with it.
I think that's the overall summary of today's session, really, isn't it? If in doubt, if you're engaging, if you're pushing or promoting something or encouraging, influencing people to make a purchase, or at least consider making a purchase, then we need to make this super clear. Now, I think that wraps everything up from our point of view, and I've seen lots of questions coming in, so I'd love to get to those very quickly. And the first one I spotted is for you, Raf, from Minnie Sprayson. She says, in your opinion, what are the key challenges in influencer marketing? What do you think needs to be done better? Obviously, we've mentioned that the platforms, in our view, could be doing a lot more to facilitate those that want to do better. But give me maybe 2 points that you think could be done better at the moment.
I think it's a very new, even though influencers have been around a while, influencer marketing is still very new. So it's catching up, it's catching up with regulations, it's catching up with best practice. There are more bodies that might be able to help, in trade bodies, and also just better agencies. If you're going to some wild, of course I'm going to say that, right? But if you're going to some Wild West, like influencer marketing agency that doesn't adhere, and you can hear very clearly today that I agree with everything Jason's saying. I'm not on the other side of the fence. I actually agree that's exactly how we should be running this industry. But not everyone believes in that, and not everyone would say that, because they're obviously out to make, in some cases, a quick buck out of the influencer marketing world. So I think working with reputable agencies, working with reputable marketing agencies, organizations, people like PromoVeritas, to help guide you through some of the difficult areas that you wouldn't necessarily understand, is probably no different to what it was like, in the days of trying to create TV ads in the 60s and 70s. So it's a new medium, and often the rules are just catching up. The platforms, they change every week. There's a new announcement from TikTok that I sit there and go, oh my God, what's that going to mean for my business? It changes on a weekly basis. So being able to keep up with that is really important. And in terms of what could be done better, I think treating it as another medium, along with outdoor advertising, TV advertising. That's what it is. It's not a hobby. This is a commercial enterprise that the platforms are making a lot of money out of, brands are making a lot of money out of, and so are creators making money out of. So it needs to be treated in the same way.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So Jason, one for you from Nellie Quinn. She says, when the CMA has fining powers, does it plan to use them against both influencers and brands? Because there's a perception that not all influencers or brands take these breaches seriously. And again, I think we've alluded to the fact that those ASA rulings maybe were falling slightly on deaf ears for those who, as Raf alluded to, are maybe at the other extreme ends of the spectrum. But it'd be interesting to get your position on where those fining powers will be positioned towards.
Yeah, I mean, I can't at this point say, well, yeah, this is the area that we're going to focus on. But what I can say is that I think that where we're going to prioritize at least some of our work is going to be where we've already issued guidance, and people, the rules are pretty clear, and we'd expect people to comply with guidance. So we've issued a lot of guidance in this area. We think the rules are pretty clear and people need to comply. So it is an area where we could well move towards issuing some fines if people are just not complying. But of course, there's always obviously going to be other things which are important for us to do as well. So I'm not committing to fine everybody, but it is an area which I think people need to take it very, very seriously. We've issued guidance. The guidance is very straightforward to follow. None of this is difficult. And the guidance is actually quite comprehensive. And as we've been discussing, I've been going back to it to check a few points. Did we cover that? Did we cover it? Yes, we've covered it. We've covered all of these points. So people just need to read our guidance, and then you're not going to be at risk of being fined if you comply with what we say.
Yeah, absolutely. And the key takeaway is from what we've understood and what we read and how we guide our clients is that brands and influencers are equally liable. If the brand isn't doing those spot checks, isn't asking the influencer to correctly label their posts and making sure that correction is made if they have accidentally omitted that, same as Raf, as you do with your talent, then the brand would be considered equally as liable as the influencer for that misleading of a consumer into not understanding that they were being advertised to.
Yeah, we've given guidance to brands as well, and that guidance is again very, very clear. There's no mystery in it. I think the only mystery is people not wanting to comply. As Raf described, there are people who don't want to comply. They don't want to label. You get brands who say, don't label. I want to make clear that's illegal. You shouldn't be giving an instruction to an influencer not to label. Brands need to take responsibility and behave responsibly as professional engaged in marketing. You don't expect to have a whole load of advertising which is just fraudulent, misleading. You expect advertising to be compliant, and that's what we'd expect brands to facilitate: compliant advertising, not trying to mislead their customers.
Absolutely. And on that track, Alana McCabe asked a question about the new digital bill. In the guise of if a brand has given clear instruction to use an ad and it's in the contract and the influencer is still refusing to use that disclosure, will they avoid any penalties? I think that's probably difficult for you to say, but I expect the response will also be, we shouldn't really be using that creator again if they're not being willing to comply. And Raf, I expect your view would be similar. You wouldn't recommend your brands to work with those creators if they're ignoring their contractual relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I've had, a creator forgot to put ad on. I was monitoring the content and spotted it and told them, and they changed it straight away. Right, genuine mistake. Sometimes people do make mistakes.
Yeah,
there are people who are, as Jason said, trying to flout the regulations to make more money and to be more successful in whatever they're trying to do. If you want to work with those sort of people, go ahead and take the risks of the regulations and the authorities coming down on you. But I would be saying absolutely not. Work with the more professional, better creators. Work with people who understand this industry, because then you're less likely to get to make a mistake.
exactly.
I mean, in our guidance to brands, we focus on 3 areas. So the first, of course, is the instruction that they give to the content creator when they're sending out the freebie or the gift or the payment or whatever it is. The second thing is actually doing some checks. And the third thing is following up afterwards. If you notice something's not right, you can't just ignore it. You've got to get on and do something about it. So those are the things that we would be looking for. If you've got an influencer who's posting, and let's face it, it's really easy to find content on social media which refers to brands. So it's not like brands can hide somehow because it's advertising their brand. So it's easy for us to find that. It's easy to see that it's not labeled. And then the question is, okay, well, what responsibility has this brand taken in all of this? Show us all of your documentation. Show us the instructions you've given the influencer. We have information gathering powers, and under the new legislation, our information gathering powers are going to be even more beefy than they are now, which is that we have to fine people for not giving us information or giving misleading information as well. So I think it's just really important for brands to take this stuff seriously and make sure they've got systems in place so that they can comply and they can demonstrate that they've been compliant. Yes, sometimes mistakes happen, but then what are you doing to sort the mistake out afterwards? We would want to see evidence of that as well.
Also, Jason, it's just worth highlighting, a contract can be a discussion, a verbal agreement, a WhatsApp. So if you've WhatsApped and said, don't put hashtag ad in your piece of content, then that is going to be brought out in disclosure if you're ever going into a brand's communication with creator. So anything where you've asked the creator to do something, if you've willingly decided that you don't want them to put #ad, you're in breach of the regulations. So, you know, I don't think people should hide behind what's in the contract. It's every piece of communication that you've instructed an influencer on would count against you in that respect.
Yeah.
Well, I'm aware we're over time, so I just literally wanted to touch on one question about global labelling. Now, obviously, you guys sit mostly in the UK, but for us, we do work on a global scale with 92 countries was the last count. And there are a lot of markets that are following very, very, very similar disclosure requirements, regardless of what authority is imposing that. And it's the same in Australia, in France, in the USA. The global requirements are mirroring one another pretty stringently. I think by the CMA and in the UK, we've really led that charge. It's been followed, and I'm not forgetting all of those rules in the likes of Denmark and the UK about influencers using filters to over enhance perhaps the effects of certain beauty or health products that they've been using, and that started off in Denmark and has come over to the UK as well. So there is a lot to understand, not just from a UK perspective, but from all these other markets that our brands might want to work in. So as a takeaway, quickly, if I may, as Raf has quite rightly said, it's about protecting the brand and the influencer, and contracts are key. Reliable talent managers, clearly, from the sounds of things, help facilitate that and help pair things and influencers and their brands so that you really do get the best out of what you're trying to achieve. And for Jason, it's quite clear that the guidance is there, but we also do help our brands. If you are in a position where you do want training to really allow your teams to understand that guidance more clearly, or how that impacts on what it is that you do and how you operate, then that's what we're here for, to help sort of disseminate that information from the CMA. But I think it's really highlighted that these finding powers are giving the CMA teeth, and I think that's really the right position that we are heading towards. And you would agree, Raf, that it's another form of advertising. All consumers should believe this to be advertising, and therefore it needs to be treated the same way. So I thank you both very much for your time and your contribution. It's been really insightful. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Apologies if we didn't get round to yours, but we're more than happy to come back, and any that are directed towards you, particularly Raf, if you're happy to, we'll pass those questions on. But thank you very, very much, everyone.
Partnerships, endorsements, brand endorsement versus influencer. So send that to me and I'll answer that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your time, and we hope it's been useful.
Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. I just saw you shared the link there, Jason. That's fantastic. We'll make sure that that goes out as well to everybody.
Yes, where you can find all of the guidance on that page.
That's perfect. We'll make sure that that goes out. And then, Raf, there were absolutely some questions that were really targeted towards you and performance, etc. So we'll pass those details on for you to be able to answer that. It makes perfect sense.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Right, good to see you all. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.